Adjusted my forecast because obviously since you and I last talked, there's been fiscal stimulus. We've seen the most recent quarter come in considerably higher, and it looks like for this year, I think we could see a 3% GDP year.
3% GDP for a year. Do you think that can continue into next year as well?
So I'll be looking at my forecast with my staff before we go into the next meeting in September. But that is well above what the economy can operate at in a steady state. And so I don't think that I see that continuing out for multiple quarters.
When you increase your GDP forecast, do you also increase your inflation forecast?
When I think about appropriate policy, I think as you look at where the economy's going, what I think the natural rate of unemployment might be, I'm not forecasting much higher inflation, although I do see it going higher.
Could you tell us what your view of a neutral federal funds reserve rate is?
We're feeling our way there. So when you look at the forecasts that are out there, you know the dot plot shows somewhere in the neighborhood of 2.5% to 3%. And I think unless something dramatically changes between now and our next meeting, that seems reasonable to me.
Can I ask, though, if your long-run forecast sees the Fed going above your view of neutral?
If we see unemployment continue to fall and inflation continue to rise, then you could argue a case for going above neutral. But those aren't the conditions, I think, that we see today.
The next rate hike, the one in September, could in fact invert the curve.
Maybe. I don't think we know that, though. Right now, the curve is flatter. And the question is, how much of that comes from short-term rates? How much of that comes from the pace at which we're going, the balance sheets around the world in terms of the stimulus that's still coming out at the long end? So it will be a factor that we discuss, and in fact, we discussed it at the last meeting, as you'll see in the minutes.
All right, great. We're coming to you, Steve.
I will be back in the next hour with what Esther George thinks about the president commenting on Fed policy, what she thinks about tariffs. And just a quick word on the conference, guys. This is one of the more interesting and maybe controversial conference topics that I remember in the many years I've been coming here. They're looking at market structure, whether things like the size of firms and their technology is one of the reasons why wages are low here. And there's a bunch of interesting papers being presented, and we'll have full coverage, including an interview this afternoon with Bob Kaplan, the Dallas Fed president. Tomorrow we'll talk to Jim Bullard and Loretta Mester and lots of other dignitaries and luminaries from Fedland here in Kansas City, guys, or Kansas City Fed.
All right. We would have talked to you at the top, but I guess your mic, did they tell you your mic was like crackling or wasn't working or something? So they rolled the...
they did, Joe.
They weren't trying to just...
They did.
They weren't trying to not let you answer.
Censure.
Yeah, they weren't trying to censor.
What I heard is that you really liked my jacket. You really liked my jacket. You really liked the way we look here. That's what I heard, Joe.
Yeah, but and then when did you get there? Just I need an update on your activities. When did you get there?
Okay, so I arrived Wednesday afternoon. I hit the stream at approximately 11 o'clock in the rain, pardon me, and then we came out a couple hours later and did the interview with Miss George. So 2 hours of fishing so far.
The rain's not necessarily a bad thing, is it, for doing that?
No, the fish are already wet. People don't understand that. It doesn't really matter that much.
Clearly proving he's a father. Dad humor. Steve, we want you to keep track of hours spent fishing versus hours interviewing, okay?
I will do that, and I'll come back with an accounting as to whether or not this trip was ultimately worth it for CNBC, and they'll evaluate that in the CNBC financial department for sure.
I was
Depends on what
wondering
you can write off.
whether it can actually be better if it's for some reason. I just thought that maybe it could actually be better. That probably makes no sense, right? They don't care one way or another, probably the fish.
Well, I think
no, it affects it. They feel the pressure in the water, Joe.
Wouldn't it be harder? I mean, I think it would be harder to see your lure hitting the water if all the raindrops are hitting too.
They might not see its allure, though.
Can I ask a question, though? When they evaluate whether or not this trip was worth it, is this conversation, you think, positive or negative? I mean, I'll be talking about fishing as long as you like.
This is on air,
or
so
we
this
could
can
talk
go
about
towards
the
your...
Fed and Federal Reserve policy. Okay, so this is good.
Don't do that. No. We want to keep viewers. Steve. Anyway,
right. A lot of them are interested in fishing, Joe, more than you think.
That's what I'm talking about.
There's a balance. We have fishermen and fisherwomen and golfers, both.
I wish you had seen Tiger's left-handed swing. I mean, he's a phenom. Anyway, we know that. Thanks, Steve. We'll be back with you.
Thanks,
I'm excited
Joe.
about
I'll see you in an hour.
Excited about Bullard and some of the other guys you got for tomorrow, the guys and gals.
That's tomorrow.
Loretta.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
Loretta.
Tomorrow.